The anime initiates with our main protagonist, Catarina Clays, in a carriage having an internal monologue, where she is determined to go against the Dune flags. Then we jump back to the past as we see that Catarina is an insufferable child that mistreats anyone around her and pretends to be a sweet child around his father and people that she's interested in. Moreover, he presents to us Jordo Stewart, the third prince of the kingdom, as her future husband. After being introduced to each other, the two of them start to walk together. Not only in an act of carelessness, Catarina falls, but she also gains her past life memories back when she was an ordinary 17-year-old high schooler otaku Japanese girl and has the realization that she died young and faints. Sometime soon, she accidentally accepts Gordo's engagement proposal since she has a scar and also has a shocking revelation. She's inside a game, an Otome game that her past self used to play too much. Fortune Lover. Remembering all the information about the game she has, she starts writing it as she presents the game's characters. Maria, a 15-year-old commoner that's destined to meet four handsome Otome guys: Jordo Stewart, Alan Stewart, a Sundeer and Jordo's little brother, Keith Clays, Catarina's adopted brother, and Mikkel Escart, the son of the First Minister, and herself. And that's right, she is the Villainess that has two endings, to be exiled and to be killed. All that awaited her was the ultimate doom. Now the opening starts. After that, our intelligent Catarina plans with her 5 neurons that she will improve her sword skills and magic to defend herself and find work in case of exile. Later, she begins to work on her farm. Upon Jordo's arrival, her head off accepts accidentally Jordo's engagement proposal even if she didn't want to, since he thinks that it'll be difficult for her to get a husband with that scar on her forehead. At night, Catarina reflects on how the game's story is progressing exactly as it is, and then the second Dune flag appears: Keith, her adoptive brother. She remembers how in the game, as a result of how his brothers, Catarina, and his mother mistreated him, he became a playboy and a frivolous person, but after meeting the main heroine, he soothed his heart and became a better person. Although Catarina still had the ultimate doom. Soon her 5 neurons have an emergency meeting where they think first about dumping him below a bridge, but the most clever one has a revelation. If Keith isn't lonely, there's no room for the ultimate doom, so Catarina, determined, decides to share her time with Keith to avoid her destiny, resulting in sharing time with him and falling on him while trying to climb a tree like her past self. She then reunites with Jordo as she narrates her story. Jordo finds it funny that a noblewoman got carried away climbing a tree. Back at Clay's mansion, Keith and Catarina still share time, and Keith helps Catarina progress with her sword skills. But then Catarina asks him to use his magic, resulting in him creating a massive earth puppet that, because of Catarina's impulsiveness, she is injured. Later that night, Catarina wakes up and realizes Keith decided to close himself in his room and accept the fault of her accidents. Catarina, determined, decides that she will talk to him whether he likes it or not, as Keith remembers how he's guilty of killing his brothers trying to protect a bird with her nest. With Keith's refusal, she breaks his door with an axe, illuminating his life, and apologizes for her behavior even after Keith confesses he was the reason for the death of his brothers. Catarina tells him that he just needs practice and they'll work together as a way for him to gain control of his powers, making Keith cry since those were some hearth-touching words that he needed. The chapter ends with Lady Clays scolding Catarina because she broke her brother's bedroom door, and with Keith being happy that he feels love and nobody is afraid of him anymore. A few months have passed since Catarina remembered her past life. She still works on her farm as a hobby, but now her plants are fading and the first signs of passive-aggressive rivalry between Jordo and Keith have grown. Later that same day at night at dinner, both of her parents talk about Catarina's invitation to Hunt's tea party. Still, thanks to Catarina's savage manners, she has to go with Keith since he has decent manners, besides Catarina being the older sister. Upon their arrival, they are welcomed by Hunt's family sisters. The older sisters present themselves, and lastly, the youngest one presents herself in a shy manner. At the party, Catarina is cornered to have an elite social life and to talk about her engagement with Jordo, making her stressed about it and go to eat all the sweets she can, even though her mother forbids it since she screamed the 3-second rule with a cookie, and Keith remembers her about it. Against her mother's will, she continues to eat until she feels a stomachache and runs to find a bathroom, finding Mary Hunt, the youngest sister, in the way. She compliments her garden's flowers and asks her if she can meet the gardener to help her, only for Mary to tell her that she's the gardener. Catarina then explains to Mary her situation with her farm and invites Mary to her house, and they bond together after Mary arrives at her house. Amused with the delicacy and knowledge of Mary, Catarina compliments her, and that makes Mary more comfortable and decides to visit her from time to time. Then Catarina expresses to Keith that maybe the cause of Mary's shyness was Catarina's villainous face, only for Keith to dismiss the disinformation by telling her all the Hunt's problems since the first wife died, and then Mary's arrived with her mother. Then Keith tells her about Mary's proximal engagement with Alan Stewart, and the third Dune flag appears. The five-neuron council reunites once again, only to realize that Catarina seduced Mary with the same line that her fiance is going to tell her to gain her heart. This only makes it so that sometime later, Alan Stewart, Mary's fiance, comes furious at Catarina's house, claiming that she's trying to steal his fiance. Catarina explodes and told him rudely all the truth that she thinks about him. Then he challenges her to a duel and thinks she chooses. So our intelligent Catarina chooses climbing trees, and Alan fails miserably against Catarina's monkey side. Despite failing, Alan continues to demand a rematch from Catarina and spends more time bonding with her, resulting in Jordo's discomfort, triggering Alan's inferiority complex with it. Catarina decides to have empathy since they bonded together and changes the challenge to a piano contest, making Alan shine with his talents and win over her. Subsequently, Alan runs away since he claims with his tsundere side that everyone is being fake with him, since they always compare him with his brother Jordo that's perfect. This makes Catarina worried enough to tell him about Jordo's weakness, snakes. In making an awful snake, she shows him how Jordo is scared as hell even of garden snakes by throwing a paper snake. Finally, Jordo discovers them hiding behind some bushes and tells Catarina that he's going to accuse her with her mother, ending this chapter with Catarina begging him not to do it. A short time passed, and Catarina enjoys reading romance books over and over again, just like her obsession with manga and anime in her past life. She's interrupted by Anne, her servant, that informs her that she's invited to a tea party hosted by Jordo and Alan. Determined, Catarina will go only to find someone as obsessed as her with romance novels, in particular, the Emerald Princess. Then we jump to Jordo and Alan, where they talk about our dear Catarina, and Jordo declares war on whoever is near his fans. Coming back with Catarina, she's eating as usual at the party until she almost explodes and rushes to a bathroom, only to be persecuted by a dog like in her past life and retreat climbing a tree. At that exact moment, by mere coincidence, she sees another girl being antagonized only by her looks and how she is a disgrace to her family. Only this nonsense is interrupted unintentionally as she falls like a superhero, Catarina, since she needed to go to the bathroom. As she saves the albino girl, she rushes once again to the bathroom. Sometime later, the handsome brother of the albino girl hears the gossip about his family and pretends to hear nothing about it. Then we jump back to Catarina that's eating again, but is interrupted by the shy albino girl. Catarina, amazed by her beauty, recites a part of the Emerald Princess, and that makes the albino girl and Catarina bond, and she told her name, Sophia Skart. In that way, Catarina invites Sophia over to her house, expecting to share time. Days go by, and finally, Sophia arrives at Catarina's house. She rushes to the living room, excited as she expects a new attacker friend in this world, and when she makes it there, she sees that Sophia came with her older brother, Nicholas Cart. As he tells his name, Catarina realizes that she's in front of the fourth Dune flag. The Neuron Council reunites again since she didn't play this route in her last life, but her old best friend, Action, did. So they place a presentation about Nichols' route, and they notice that Catarina's life is not threatened by Nichols' route because they could befriend Sophia, and that's the only requirement to gain his trust to survive. They spent all the afternoon reading books and chatting about them until the carriage arrives to take Sophia and Nickel back home. As they're about to leave, Catarina compliments Sophia's hair and says it's the most beautiful hair she has ever seen, and her eyes are like rubies. This moves Sophia's heart, and even when she considers that she looks like an old man, Catarina denies it and asks her to become friends, which she accepts and offers Catarina to go to her home. When Keith and Catarina are at Ascart's household, they're arrived by their parents, who welcome and thank them for their kindness to Sophia. Then Sophia appears and asks them to go with her and began to read and enjoy their evening with her and Nickel. Even Catarina compared Ichan with Sophia since they're very similar to each other, as she's 100% sure that Sophia would be an otaku back in her world. As they're about to go home, Sophia forgot the book that she was going to lend to Catarina, the Devilish Earl, and rushes back to her room, letting Nickel and both Catarina and Keith alone with her brother. Suddenly, the awkward silence won the room, and Catarina tries the method of a talkative neighbor back in her past life who could retain without their consent every person for 30 minutes straight. After 2 tries, she only succeeds to make Nickel smile, since she complimented his family, and that smile only makes Keith worried as he sees another rival arising. 7 years passed since Catarina remembered her past life and started fighting against Destiny, and that specific day is her 15th birthday. As she goes to the ball for her birthday, she encounters her friends in Jordo, who invited her to dance. Catarina tells him to cancel their engagement since he doesn't need to pretend anymore, and in that process, he refuses and takes advantage of how dense a block wall is. Catarina and kisses her neck, with she thinking that was only a bug, even with Keith desperately trying to clean the impurity of Jordo's action. After Catarina dances with Alan and then with Nickel, who confesses his love to her, but Catarina is as dense as a black hole and interprets it like he's telling this like friends. Finally, the night closes and the chapter finalizes with Catarina dancing along with Sophia and Mary, who is extremely jealous of the men, and Catarina wishes that she can continue her life with her friends by her side. We came back to the present, where the story of the game begins as Catarina and Keith are now headed to the Magic Academy since every person with magic has to go. At the academy, Catarina reflects on how she failed to try to avoid the doom flags with Jordo and Keith, but succeeded with Alan and Nickel. Then the welcome speech occurs and we're presented to Sirius Geek. Catarina is trying to find the main protagonist of the game to be interrupted by Jordo that wants to invite her to eat at his dormitory, which accepts. As Catarina arrives, Keith becomes the third wheel to frustrate Jordo and the conflict arises once more. Afterward, Jordo says that he found a girl that climbed trees and just like in the game, Jordo had his first encounter with Maria that worries Catarina and lets her think. At the same time, the other two talks about it aren't excellent since Catarina did that a lot of times in her youth. In that way, shortly after Keith reveals that he had also an encounter with her and Catarina worries a lot, but she's supportive about his brother being with Maria, even with Keith denying any pinch of interest, and the scenery of Keith is different in the game since in it, Keith was a womanizer that only recovered the handkerchief after being rejected by Maria. Later that day in the hallways, Catarina finally found the heroine of the game. Maria Campbell and the 5 Neuron Council decides once more to make a little farm in the gardens of the academy to be proficient in farming in case Catarina is exiled and has to find a job even if it's in the school's ground property. As time passes, the first exams happen and Jordo, Maria, and Alan are the first, second, and third places, which makes the first two become part of the student council since it's mandatory. Catarina expects that Alan behaves in the game and searches for a rivalry with Maria, but Alan has overcome his inferiority complex and it's just chill with that. Also, this makes Catarina goes to the student council for Jordo and bond with Maria and asks her for her pastries since they were delicious. Soon after that, guided by a delicious smell, Catarina finds that Maria is being bullied by a bunch of girls that throw her muffins to the ground, which makes Catarina furious and scares them with her villainous look. Next, Catarina decides to eat all her muffins without thinking and stops when satisfied only to realize that she ate them all and feels guilty about it, but Maria doesn't care as Catarina flatters her ability to cook. At the end of this chapter, Catarina realizes that this was an event for Jordo's route and celebrates since she interrupted the event without notice. The day begins with Catarina being helped by Maria with her homework and giving her pastries. Our dear Catarina narrates that the two of them became closer after the incident, and the same goes with the student council president that serves her tea. While the 5 Neuron Council is happy that they're friends with Maria inside the council, they're not outside it and barely greet Maria outside it. The 5 Neuron Council then decides that it is time to become friends with Maria inside and outside the council. Later on the improvised farm of Catarina, she talks with Keith as she explains her situation of loneliness of Maria and bullying. Keith then suggests that they should spend more time with Maria to protect her. Immediately, Catarina agrees and goes to search for Maria in the spot where she remembered that in the game she spent most of her time only to see another bullying incident as a bunch of girls threatened to burn Maria since they thought the academy made a mistake in her admission and only admitted her because of her magic and not because she was a good student. When the pyromaniac wizard came closer to Maria, Catarina interrupts with her lump of earth and makes a speech about how the prestigious academy would never do such a thing and that if they're still searching for trouble, they'll find their doom, which scares the bullers and they ran away once again. This makes Maria and Catarina closer as they start calling each other by their names and not by their surnames. Catarina, shortly after bonding with Maria, decides to visit Maria's house with an excuse of field research about farming because in her free days, Maria limits only to go back to her home. As Keith and her dress as commoners, they travel to Maria's town while in the process, Catarina asks for counseling from the local farmers and enjoys her time. When they arrive at Maria's town, they realize that Maria is famous there, but only because of bad gossiping about her being the illegitimate daughter of a noble. Keith then uses his charm to be left alone with Catarina. When they make it to Maria's house, they're welcomed by her mother. Soon after, Maria arrives and decides to make cookies for the two of them, which makes the mother remembers how their life changed after Maria realized she had light magic and the town thought that she was the daughter of a noble, and that made it impossible to Maria to make friends in town. The chapter ends with Catarina and Keith going to visit their mother, and she starts to scold them since they have commoners' clothes, and she heard a rumor that someone made a farm on the school's grounds. The summer break has arrived and everyone is happy about it, especially dear Catarina, who's spending her time concentrating on how to avoid her doom flags and constructing wooden toy snakes and improving her farm skills, ignoring her brother telling her about the homework. Catarina spends her time being loud and working on the farm while also being scolded by her mom. Besides, she spends time with her younger brother Keith and enjoys it too much that goes to sleep on the grass. Meanwhile, Keith tried to kiss her while sleeping, but she woke up with a thought in her head. Not long after, Giordo appears to invite Catarina to the lake, just the two of them, but all the side characters appear after Catarina invites them. After that, they enjoy themselves rowing boats and having picnics until it's late. Afterward, Nicole, Sofia, and Catarina go out shopping, and Sofia leaves alone the other two because she's secretly rooting for his brother. His brother tries to make and move on her, but she doesn't notice at all because she's having trouble with his charm. As the episode progresses, the same filler dynamic as we go to a party where Alan is doing a piano recital and plays a beautiful song called For You My Beloved, only to Catarina ask if he played with someone in mind, where Alan answered that yes, he did. Sorely, Mary interrupts abruptly while thinking that she may try again to sow the seed of doubt. The episode finishes with Catarina noticing that she didn't do her homework at all, just like in her past life, and Keith offers to help her even though he did warn her about this. Catarina just remembers how a Chin was like this in her past life, only to hear a distant voice that was Anne, her servant. Waking up, she realizes that she ended up doing nothing of her homework. Episode 7 begins with Catarina's past life's best friend, a Chin that met her when Catarina landed on her with her when she tried to climb a tree. Then we learn that Akin's real name is Sasaki Atsuko, and we never get to know Catarina's past life name since it was interrupted. They both spend time together reading manga, watching anime, and playing video games until Catarina's past self got in a car accident and died unfortunately. Action sees that her last message was that she couldn't make it through Giordo's route since it was difficult, and she breaks into tears only to plead to the universe that her only wish is that she wants to see Catarina again in her next life, which turns out that this flashback was Sofia's dream as she wakes up crying and feeling extremely sad. Just after that, Sofia visits Catarina, and the two of them promise to each other put effort into the coming exams. Now we're at the practical exam of the group, which consists in going into some ancient ruins where ancient mages used to live before and retrieve mana stones from there. Catarina ends up being in the same group as Keith, Giordo, and Sofia, which makes the rivalry between the first two noticeable. Our dear Catarina being who she is ends up activating most of the traps in the labyrinth, which makes Giordo use his fire magic for the first time. Sofia shines with her knowledge of an ancient language, and Keith uses his earth magic to make a bridge, which makes Catarina sad since she's not helping at all with the group. Meanwhile, Mary, Maria, and Alan are having trouble too with the labyrinth traps. Furthermore, she ends up activating more traps and separated from the group in one of those. As the council decides to cut mushrooms to survive, her group asks Nickel for help since he was one of the supervisors along with Sirius Geek, in which he and Sofia help using their wind magic to only hear the word mushroom from Catarina, and ends more confused than before. Going back with Catarina, she finds a glowing sharp stone that uses to cut more mushrooms, and in that process, she slips into the abyss, yet Sofia gets there in time and grabs her, and some use their wind magic, and both of them are saved by a mysterious gust of wind. Sofia feels relieved because she got a bad feeling about this, and the group arrives and is also relieved that Catarina is oak. They notice that the stone that Catarina used to collect mushrooms was the stone they all were looking for. Finally, while they're leaving, Maria notices a strange shadow that was chasing Catarina. Chapter 8 starts with Catarina happy working on her farm when suddenly Alan appears to only say hi, and because Catarina didn't like the pumpkin, she gives it to Alan. When the realization occurs, she doesn't understand anything about her current school subjects. As Mary spies both of them and decides to go out to become a third wheel, Catarina goes to ask for help, and she finds Mary in the way. Mary and Catarina plan to study together, but because Catarina didn't understand anything, they both decide to go to the student council and ask the president for help, which sends them both to the library to understand one subject. On the way, all of Catarina's friends join the quest, and everybody heads to the library. At the library, everyone studies hard, and Mary and Maria decide to grab some snacks and tea. But while they were out, Catarina grabs a book that suddenly sucks everyone except Mary and Maria into it. Both of them grab the book and read the first page, which said, "The only way out of the book, if it one of the absorbed ones can obtain their greatest desire, and the only way to achieve that is by reading their story." Then Mary and Maria begin to read the book. As they read the first chapter, Giordo wants to marry Catarina and try to spend their honeymoon, only for Catarina be oblivious and Mary to close the book abruptly since she couldn't bear to read this. Maria thinks that it can be an illusion, so Mary calms down and they begin to read again. This chapter is about Keith being a tutor that tries to seduce Catarina with sweets and almost accomplishes it. But Mary decides to close the book as Maria has thoughts about what they saw. Realizing that almost everyone wants to nail Catarina since Sofia in her dream expresses her love and Nickel is the devilish earl to Catarina, Mary wants to burn the book because she no longer can't stand this, but Maria convinces marrying after since Catarina and the others could die. So she opens the book again only to see Alan playing piano for Mary to close the book again since she already expects what will happen. Both Mary and Maria conclude that the best way to get them all out of there is with Catarina's dream, who only wishes tea and food that already Mary and Maria have out there. As the dream progresses, Catarina finds a sweet-made house, and because of her hunger, she eats the house and explodes everyone out of the book, including herself. At the library, Mary and Maria conclude that his book is one of the 7 relics of the school, and that the book was suffering since Catarina was insatiable. The episode ends with everyone having a tea party at the library. This episode begins with Catarina being happy about she could advance to the next grade thanks to Anne. As the day passes, it's the same. Catarina tries to break off Jordo's engagement, but Jordo refuses. Keith still thinks that she's not fit to marry Jordo. Alan is in love with Catarina, but doesn't understand his feelings. Mikkel is in love with Catarina, but Catarina doesn't notice, even with Mikkel being only expressive around her. Mary is also in love with Catarina and reached the extreme to propose her to break off their engagement and run away together, something that Catarina took as a joke instead of something serious. Also, Sofia is in love with Catarina, not in a romantic way, but tries to sell his brother to Catarina in the best way possible to only fail. Lastly, Maria is in love with Catarina too, and spends her time baking her pastries to make Catarina happy. Come on the scene now, the girls are spending their time at a pajama party, and Catarina once again asks if anyone has a romantical interest, which everyone answers. You, Catarina. Making Catarina think that maybe her friends don't have any romantic interest, which calms her above all with Maria. We jump to Catarina's maid, Anne Shelley, as she remembers her past, as she was the illegitimate daughter of a cold-hearted man called Baron Shelley, and her mother advised her of being a good and submissive girl to gain the Baron's favor. But tragedy struck when she was 15 years old, and in the middle of a fire, Anne and her mother got caught in a room, and her mother died. Anne was able to escape, but had several injuries that scared her, which made the Baron lose interest in her. Since she couldn't get married for her scars, he kicked her out of the house. Anne went to the Clay's house, since they were distant relatives of the Baron, and she was. Her life was monotonous, as she didn't think by herself and limits to only taking orders from Catarina, since she was a horrendous and egoistical child. But all changed after Catarina fell and bumped her head. Her personality changed into a more cheerful personality and made Anne feel that she finally had a place where she could belong. The Baron then came back to still use Anne as a mere tool for his purposes and wants to marry Anne in a political marriage. But Catarina interferes with this and do a speech about how important was Anne in her life, and she couldn't afford to lose her. This makes Anne confident enough to finally rebel against her father and for the first time think what's better for herself and stand up against the jerk of her father. And because of that, now Anne has an appreciation for Catarina, as she thinks she molded her into the person she is now and will follow her without question no matter what. The next morning, we jump to Jordo, who's invited by Catarina in a beautiful letter that makes him first have hope that Catarina finally loves him, but then suspicious since it's Catarina. She's capable of anything. On the other hand, he thought that maybe a beautiful gift would animate her and take a step in his conquest, so he decides to buy a pair of garden scissors. As he arrives at the farm, he realizes that the whole cast is there and everyone got the same letter. Also, everyone bought Catarina a pair of garden scissors, and Catarina gathered them since it's harvest day and she needs help. The episode ends with everyone disappointed since Catarina is still oblivious to their moves. The trial had been set in motion, and a group of girls corner Catarina into confessing her crimes against Maria, even though Catarina didn't commit any of the crimes, which makes Catarina desperate, since she thinks she's about to get punished as in the game. Suddenly, everyone arrives, including Maria, and they're handed the evidence documents to all of them as they read Catarina is insecure about her destiny, since this is the pivotal moment where Catarina Clays is either exiled or murdered. After reading the documents, Maria exclaims that she will not tolerate gossiping and fake accusations about someone so important in her life as Catarina, and the group supports her by stating that Catarina would never do such an elaborate bullying chronogram plan, as she's stupid as a brick, which makes Catarina more confused since she doesn't know if they are defending her or directly insulting her. Even Maria offers to directly point out the people that are bullying her if they want to. This makes the bullies run off, and while doing so, Maria notices the same shadow aura that she saw in the ancient ruins radiating from the girls. Later, Catarina is more calm, and her group of friends are still thinking about the incident as they walk. Maria again notices the black shadow aura coming from the gardens and separates from the group because she wants to investigate it by herself, which resulted in her disappearance. For 2 days straight without any trace of her. Everybody goes out in her search to no avail. After 3 days, Jordo visits Catarina at midnight and tells her shocking news. While investigating, Jordo found out that every person that accused her the day Maria disappeared, and they don't remember anything from that day, their motives, and where they got their documents. With this thing in mind, Jordo thinks that they could be manipulated with dark magic, as well as Catarina interferes since she never had heard about dark magic before. Jordo explains to her that's a well-kept secret, a type of magic that could manipulate the hearts and the minds of the people, amplifying the hate and envy without remorse. Moreover, the only way to obtain it is via human sacrifice, and the affected cannot remember why they did what they did. Also, the only way to detect it is with light magic, and probably the person who did all of this could be the kidnapper of Maria. Catarina reflects on what Jordo said and trembles with fear at the thought of someone capable of doing that. As she walks, she goes to Maria's favorite bank and sits down for Sirius Geek, interfering with her thoughts as she talks with him. Normally, the sudden memory of action appears as she told her in her past life that the hardest route of the game was a hidden character and it's only conquerable in this route, and the physical description matches with Sirius Geek. And the worst part is that in this route, if you fail to conquer the character, everyone will die as the worst ending possible. With this in mind, she inadvertently asks him if he's the dark magic user, and that makes Sirius play innocent at first, but then admits that he's the user, and he's the culprit of Maria's kidnap, as she came to him seeing the black shadow and desperately used anesthesia and took her unconscious to stay clean. With all of these confessions, he also makes clear that his real target is Catarina, since he considers her a hypocrite. However, this makes Catarina worried because she felt that Sirius was suffering and in agony inside. Lastly, the last scene is Sirius crying and asking Catarina to fall asleep forever until she dies with his magic. Catarina wakes up in her old world and takes a cucumber for breakfast, breaking the toast stereotype. As she arrives at her old school late and spends her day until she reunites with Action at lunchtime, she feels like she doesn't remember something very important. Back in the other world, Catarina is in a coma state while all of her friends are worried about her and pleads to the doctor to find a cure, but the doctor states that there is no physical condition and Catarina may wake up in 2 days or never wakes up. This makes Keith upset, but he has to accept this harsh reality. All of them start to lose hope, especially Jordo, that tries to hydrate Catarina using his lips. Suddenly, everyone by the power of friendship starts to remember how Catarina colored their life and how they became better persons. As they all remember Catarina, Sophia hears a voice inside her head that tells her to go there. As she sees Action, she tells her that she already lost her in one life and will not permit lose her again in another life. Everyone arrives as Sophia tells them to call Catarina to be listened to by her. In the other world, Catarina reunites with Action, who tells her that she doesn't belong anymore in this world and she needs to go back to her respective world. As Catarina realizes that everyone is calling her and becomes once again herself, she exclaims that she has to go back to the people she loves even if she misses her world, and is eternally grateful to Action, her childhood best friend, and her loving family. When she starts to remember, this world starts to fall apart. Finally, Catarina asks her where Maria is, and Action tells her that she's still on the school grounds in a hidden room in the storehouse. Just before Catarina could ask something more, she slips and finally falls, and while falling, Action tells her something it may help her later, and also Catarina finally says a proper goodbye to her dearest friend, and Action tells her that she'll accompany her in this next life as Sophia, which confirms that Action reincarnated in Sophia. Catarina wakes up and tells them all the information she gathered in a dream, and everybody follows her without question and discovers that indeed she was telling the truth. There was a hidden room in the storehouse, and quickly they find Maria to finally have their final confrontation with Sirius. The final confrontation is here as they cornered Sirius in the dark room. He then reveals that he's not the real Sirius, as he's telling them about his previous life before he became Sirius, as his mother had an affair with a Marquis, and how the Marquis' wife found out about the affair because she kidnapped both. As she explains that instead of accepting her son's inevitable death, she would do anything to save him by transferring his soul to another and providing him with a healthier body to live in since he has a mortal disease, and also because she wanted to get revenge on his mother. The mage performs the ritual as he has to and kills his mother to obtain black magic and transfers the ill son's memories to Sirius, and then got betrayed by the underlings of the Marquis' wife, but the mage didn't transfer the Marquis' son's soul to Sirius, only his memories. In that way, he tells them that he's still himself and that he took on the identity of Sirius Geek. Meanwhile, he got his revenge against the one that killed his mother, since the supposed last plea of her mother was to take revenge on the people that damaged them. He calls Catarina a hypocrite and how she will not be capable of saving him. While he narrates this, the dark fog expanded and Maria pleads for everyone to be careful around him as he's in anger. Catarina ignores this warning and continues walking calmly as she tells Sirius that she's not supposed to save anyone, but she'll stay by his side while he saves himself. Nextly, she says his real name, Raphael Waltz. Surprised about how she knew his name, he then realizes that he no longer wants to stay in this self-destructive path, and he tries to free himself from this dark magic. The results are that the dark mage that was killed was inside of him, and he tries to convince him to follow this path, that his mother asked him for revenge, and that he has to accomplish this. At that moment, Raphael remembered that her mother asked him to live not to get revenge, only for getting revenge against Marquis' wife. With that in mind and his strong will with Catarina, He expelled the dark mage, finally getting free from his influence and dissipating the dark magic. After that, everyone got out of the building and Raphael expressed that he wanted to go clean and he will confess every crime he committed against Catarina and the people he harmed. Also, he goes to the authorities to get the Marquis's wife and her underlings arrested for their crimes and get the justice they deserve. Finally, the graduation day came. Catarina and her friends finally advanced to 2nd grade and Nickel graduated from school. The 5-neuron council made the last meeting because they were evaluating any route of escape and how they avoided every possible bad ending. Nickel received a lot of flowers and a vegetable bouquet from Catarina since Catarina is Catarina, making everybody laugh at this. Catarina couldn't stand any longer that Maria didn't make any progress in going to confess her love to any of the boys, since this was the final event of the game that determined who's gonna end with Maria, and for a moment believes that this is the inverse harem ending where Maria gets all the boys. This makes Catarina so stressed that she eats a lot, and Keith point this. At long last, Catarina asks Maria whom she loves. Maria answers that she is Catarina and tells her the line that is used in the game to the next couple of Maria, but Catarina is as oblivious as a moth in a lamp, so when all her friends tell her that they love her, she interprets it as the final ending, the friendship ending. Ending with Catarina being happy and relieved that she finally avoided her ultimate doom and can be at peace with the people she loves. Time passed and now Catarina and her friends spend time at the student council. In those times they received a visit from Sirius Geek, who is now working with the magic department and also promises Catarina to stay by her side and be loyal to her, which makes the count of Keith's rivals increase. This season ends with Catarina heading ahead to the future with a smile since the game script is no longer against her, and now she can finally be happy because she no longer knows what's coming next. Season 2, Chapter 1. It's a new day in Catarina's life. Catarina is awakened by Annie after she stayed up late while reading romantic novels. Now she's happy since she no longer has to fight against her destiny. And while she's happy, the 5-neuron does a recap of everything that has happened until now while she's working on her farm. This makes her parents worried but also happy since she's now more cheerful than usual. Later, Prince Jordo called her because he was planning a school festival that celebrated every 2 years, but Catarina thinks that's gonna be the same as the festivals in Japan with okonomiyaki and Japanese food. While Catarina is super happy, her brother isn't since Jordo now acts like he doesn't exist. A day passes and now Catarina is sad in the school's warehouse. Maria enters the room and tells her that soon is going to be a play in the theater where almost all of her friends are going to participate, and then asks Catarina what's wrong, so Catarina answers that she was sad since her crops cannot be sold at the school's festival because it wasn't worthy of nobility. Maria then asks her if she can use her crops to bake some pastries, and Catarina had an excellent idea and asked Maria if she could do pastries for the school festival. Maria doubts at the beginning, but then accepts. Shortly after that, Maria and Catarina propose the homemade dessert stand to Jordo. While he wanted to reject the idea, he saw Catarina's puppy's eyes and couldn't resist going against the idea and gave permission. The day of the festival came and Catarina was excited to eat all kinds of sweets, but then remembers if her mother's catch her jumping and acting like a child, it was over for her, so she became cautious in case her mother is in the festival, even though she doesn't like this kind of events. But sadness strikes in Catarina's life as she arrives at the festival and there are no street sweets and only fancy gourmet food, but is saved by a girl that feeds for something delicious. Time later, she encounters Keith and Mary since they plan together to eat a lunch, and Catarina worries that as the time passes, Keith become more like their mother. Then Catarina tries to feed Keith in his mouth and Keith is nervous since Mary is there. Mary then gets a little angrier and asks Keith to not take any privilege in being family, and that unleashes a discussion between the two of them. Catarina interprets that they are in love as she believes her woman intuition is on point, but it's on the point of a mountain because she's too stupid and misunderstands the whole situation. After that, Sophia asks Catarina to practice with her brother the script that she wrote, as nobody can resist the devilish charm of her brother as a way to her brother, so that way his brother can flirt with her. In this process, Nickel once again declares his love for Catarina and even hugs her, but Catarina is too dense and misunderstands it since she believes he forgot his script. Following this encounter, she finds Maria and Raphael talking in the homemade pastry stands. Raphael tells Catarina that Maria wants to join the magic department because she wants to stay by Catarina's side, but the joy of pure intentions is suddenly interrupted as Catarina's engagement is still on. However, if she joins the department, she can lengthen the time of her going to the castle. Then Maria and Catarina promise to join together the department. Soonly, Catarina has to reunite with Jordo and Alan as she arrives because Catarina is so distracted. Alan starts to mock her, making Alan and Jordo fight briefly until their brother Ian and Jeffrey arrives with their finances, Selena and Susanna, who are there because officials matters even when Jeffrey admits that he's mostly there for his brothers. Suddenly we see Catarina acting as a villain with Maria, and it's not known how it got like this. The jump from one scene to another reveals that because someone from the cast had an accident, Catarina had to become the Machiavellian sister of the play. Hence, everyone agreed that even if she was not part of the student council, she could do it perfectly fine, even when Catarina didn't want to do it. Then they started to practice for a few hours before the play started, and Catarina tried hard to learn the script that Sophia wrote since she's the author of the play but couldn't, so she wrote some cue cards to read them. As she writes them, she makes a comparison with Cinderella, but without any magic and glass slippers, but they had farmers and farmers' boots. Also that Maria is the main protagonist, and Catarina and Mary are the diabolical stepmother and sisters. After that, Maria came and thanked Catarina for the boots and cheered her up even when Catarina only apologizes for giving her old boots. Having Mary backing up her, Catarina promptly has to go to the stage as Jordo notices that she's revealing too much and decides to cover her. Without knowing, Catarina's parents arrive at the theater, and her mother thanks the heavens that she's not in the play as she thinks that she would ruin everything. The play starts and Maria is giving all and captivates the public with her amazing acting skills. Then the curtains open to the part where Catarina and Mary act along with Maria, and even when Mary tries to help Catarina since she lost her cue cards and Alan is being a man and doesn't take hints, she can't recover then, and also she doesn't remember her lines. As the 5-neuron council arises once again, they notice the most simple solution. Catarina then acts like she would act in Fortune Lover, taking by surprise everyone as she is ad-libbing, which fascinates the audience and her friends because the acting was too realistic. Which makes Sophia inspires and modifies the script by making a subplot about a knight that loves the evil sister, and this knight is going to be Nickel, since Sophia wants to ship his brother with Catarina. The second act begins at the ball, and suddenly the Dark Knight arrives and takes Catarina as a hostage, but because he was too close to Catarina, unleashes a sword fight for her with Jordo, Keith, and Nickel as participants, while Alan is giving everything at the piano. After the chaos takes over the scene, Catarina realizes that she has to give the protagonism to Maria soon or the play will be over. So she asks for reflectors and improvises by telling them that this was a plan to take the prince's attention and win him over. Later, Sophia thanks Catarina, and Mary briefly scolds the 3 men children as they got crazy there. The play now can continue as the same as Cinderella, with Maria being founded with the old boot and the prince asking her to marry him, but with the only difference that the Dark Knight tells the evil sister that he loves her. Everyone is fascinated with the acting of Catarina, even her mother that has no hope in her. At night, Catarina is dressing herself to go to a ball, and someone knocks on the door. As she opens, a strange girl appears to guide her to the ballroom, and she accepts. After walking a few steps, Catarina asks if they're lost, but suddenly someone grabs her and puts a napkin on her face, making her faint. Following the night, Jordo receives a letter about Catarina, and we jump to another scene as Catarina wakes up in another house where she's welcomed by a servant called Lana and Selena that ask her forgiveness for kidnapping her. In the beginning, the council doesn't believe she's being kidnapped and thinks this was because of her family's money, also thinks that her mother will not give any money away as they still have Keith. Catarina then asks about how much the ransom money, but Selena declares that it's not because of that. When she's going to tell her the truth, the butler, Rufus Brode, interrupts and forces with magic her out of the room, leaving alone Catarina with the maid, and even at the face of danger, Catarina still asks for sweets and enjoys them. Elsewhere, Jordo meets Jeffrey and gives him the letter that said that if he wanted to see again Catarina, he has to give up the throne, and with that motive, his brother is going to help him. Time passes, and Catarina delights the maid with her occurrences since she's not worried at all while being kidnapped and enjoys her time eating and reading like it's a vacation. At dinner, Catarina makes Lana laugh while thinking that Selena is suffering, hence she looks conflicted and she's hiding it. Selena is also going to tell Catarina the truth, but once again is hypnotized by Rufus, making her go to her room even while Catarina notices it. Later at night, Selena goes to Catarina's room and tells her that she planned the kidnapping, hence various nobles supported Jordo, and the only way to make him give up being the heir to the throne is by her, and if that way her fiance can join the crown race. Even Catarina thought it was madness that Jordo would never give up such an important thing, but Selena disagrees since everyone knows that Jordo loves her deeply. We jump to the academy as Catarina's harem is questioning how they are going to find Catarina and what to do with this situation due to abdicating the throne is a long process. So they decide that's a better option to find Catarina. Maria tells them that maybe there's magic involucrated in this, and Mary wants to interrogate personally every suspect, but everyone calms her. Raphael then assures that Catarina is going to be Uck. As everyone is trying to help Catarina, Catarina is trying to comfort Selena while she's having a breakdown, hence she felt that she was never enough for her fiancé even when she tried her best to be the perfect match for him and an excellent fiancé. But she will be never enough, so she plans to make Jordo renounce the throne and then admit her guiltiness, and with that make Anne the next to the throne. Catarina then comforts, saying that she's enough and that the two of them become friends. Selena decides to end the kidnapping and surrender to the authorities, but when she's going out, Rufus comes in and knocks her out with her magic. First, he calms Catarina as he tells her that he only put her asleep and then reveals his shocking plan. He plans to make her disappear along with Catarina, Giordo, and Ian. The five Neuron Council try to process what is happening since Rufu's appearance and plan. At noon, Rufus wakes up Catarina, and the moment she wakes up, Catarina asks for Selena's well-being, and Rufus assures her that she is okay and is surprised that he's unable to knock out Catarina. Then he talks about why is he doing this. It results that he's wanting to make his master the heir to the throne by making Giordo and Ian surrender it so Prince Geoffrey could be the next king. At that moment, Rufus left a bell so that when she needs something, she could ring it, but she immediately ring it and request food. After that, he serves breakfast and sees how Catarina is enjoying the breakfast without any worries and with the delicacy of a pig, so he drops his elegant act and talks like a commoner while narrating how was his life before Geoffrey as he lived in the slums of another country and he was sold as a slave to his current master. Even with that, he considers himself fortunate as he could have had the worst future. Next, Catarina claims that she admires Rufu's optimistic mindset and she calls him great, which disconcerts Rufus, making him laugh about the ridiculous situation. After that, Catarina tries to indicate more. She wants to know how he got dark magic, which he answered that his master made him asleep and then he woke up with dark magic. Afterward, Rufus reflects on his past and how he was captured to be sold as a slave, how his master taught him how to write and read, and also told him stories about the exterior world while naming him Sora. At dinner, he has a wonderful chat with Catarina in which Catarina compliments his look by saying his eyes are as beautiful as the sky and wants to give Rufus a brooch that she bought at the school festival, which makes Rufus take her to the bed and try to kiss her, but thankfully he got his senses again and stopped right before doing something bad. At that moment, Lana interrupts their moment together and informs Rufus of an urgent matter that needs his attention. Rufus received a letter that states that the investigation has spread to the Mason Manor. That night, Rufus awakens Catarina and tells her that his master's plan was foiled and says his farewell and admits his love to her. Catarina's friends enter the room and interrupt him. Lana then reveals that she knew Catarina and hugs her, revealing that all this time she was Lana Smith, the director of the magic tool laboratory, infiltrated since something smells spoiled there. Besides, Ian and Selena reunite and he tells her that he loved him and it wasn't necessary for any of this, reconciling. Coming back with Beccarina as she wakes up everybody as they're worried about her, but she doesn't reveal that this kidnapping was more like a vacation to her, and then Giordo notices something in her neck, which she explained to them what happened at the dinner with the butler, but she is so naive that she thought it was a bug bite. Giordo, tired of trying to go to her pace, makes the greatest advance and kisses her on her lips, making the harem go nuts as they see Giordo advancing territory at war. Catarina then wakes up and she thinks the kiss just was a dream from her. Later, Catarina is followed by her group of friends since they're worried about her. Elsewhere, Lana Smith is revealed to be Susanna and meets Geoffrey and informs him that this was all David Mason's plot to overthrow him, and he decides to punish him because he'll not tolerate anyone that will hurt his younger siblings, hence why he has so many photos of them in all his rooms since he's a little obsessed with them. Since he was a child, he promised to protect Ellen and Giordo, but because of the time and ability issues, he couldn't stay by their side. Meanwhile, Giordo is drowned in paperwork by Mary, maybe as a form of revenge. As Alan gets in the room and they start talking about how his older brother always tried to protect them since they were children because he was taking care of the kidnapping incident. Also, Giordo has a flashback about how Catarina changed his life, while on the other hand, we see Alan's childhood as he was ill until 5 years old and how Giordo took care of him with all his love, but even with that, when he recovered, he was overwhelmed by his inferiority complex. His brother Geoffrey tried to help but made things worse, but it all was solved when they met Catarina and made their relationship better once again. Geoffrey thanked her later. Elsewhere, Ian and Selena are talking about the recent events and how he came to understand Geoffrey's desires. Also, Geoffrey and Susanna are reunited, and as Susanna wants to leave, Geoffrey stops and warns her about the possibility of people wanting to get a hold of the dark magic knowledge the family has. In the afternoon, Catarina is hiding in her farm since everyone didn't let her alone, so Giordo arrives there and she's shy to him as she thinks the dream was too realistic. Only for Giordo to declare that it wasn't a dream and kisses her one more time, arising the fury of the harem as everyone wants to hurt him, even Maria that told the people to hurt him consciously because she has to heal him. This thing flabbergasts and takes by surprise Catarina. Catarina receives a gift from Giordo and an invitation to his villa. The Five Neuron Council evaluates the situation because of the kiss since she has no experience in relationships. But the council agrees to go since it would be disrespectful and rude. So she goes, but Giordo is uncomfortable because Keith tags along as well with the rest of the group since Alan thought it was a good idea to invite everyone to the villa, and his real motives were because everyone could watch any moves from Giordo, so the rivalry rises hidden and slowly in the villa. Because of this, Catarina goes to the forest and finds the tree where she climbed and played when she was a child. While she's nostalgic, also she's sad since she doesn't want to marry and become a queen due to the restrictions and the responsibilities it contains. Maria arrives and comforts Catarina after Mary and Sophia arrive as well, but it starts to rain, so they have to search for shelter, and they find a log cabin to do so. After that, Catarina and Sophia start to remember an incident that happened some time ago. At a reunion when they were children, Catarina suggested going to the forest, but everyone is against it since there was a rumor about a ghost there, but Catarina insists on going. Sophia then suggests instead talking with the ghost to appease its sadness since the rumors told that the ghost was crying. In the way, Alan was the most coward as he was scared even with a rabbit and at every sound. Catarina, unlike him, was unworried about it with a calm that invaded her friends as they completely forgot about it. After it, the servants arrived and they didn't find any ghosts, so they divided for the hunt. As the girls were walking through the forest, a heavy rain started pouring and Sophia started to worry and blamed Catarina for disrespecting the ghosts and being cursed. At that moment, Catarina started to imagine things and Mary joined her to appease Mary's fear of lightning and Sophia's fear of darkness. So Catarina insisted her partners use their imagination while the rain stops. Shortly, Sophia imagined Catarina and her fighting a dragon as adventurers and then going to Mary. Her imagination is so contagious that everyone starts to imagine things until the rain stops. The night passes and the girls' group then is contemplating a beautiful crystal lake as Keith and the boys arrive worried since they couldn't find them, but the whole group had a fun night so it was worthwhile. Even Alan was worried, but Catarina calmed him as he had conflicted feelings as a child. Back to the future, Maria is enjoying their story as she asks if the ghost hunt didn't succeed until Sophia tells her that they eventually found the ghost and Catarina says yes, and that was later that evening. After the dinner party, jumping to the past once again, everyone is waiting for Catarina that's still late to the reunion, but Keith arrives and tells them that she's unable to attend and suddenly they hear the cryings of the ghost and Alan freak out. As they go outside and see the shadow of a mysterious figure making Alan need diapers again as he hugs Jordo for protection, but then they hear that in reality is her mother scolding her. And then they remember that the ghost was last spotted last summer when they were all invited again, so they conclude that it was Catarina and Duchess Clays. And then they laughed while Catarina was suffering. Coming back to the present, Catarina expressed that a ghost is more appealing than the wrath of her mother. Also, Mary expresses how lightning was scary back then, and Sophia how the forest was enormous, but right now it doesn't seem like that, as they reflect that a lot of things change when they grow up. Then the rain stops and they could invite Maria to see the beautiful lake they saw as children, and as Catarina wants to make memories with Maria now that they are with them. After that, they had a dinner party, so Alan becomes its son dear as he wanted to be invited, but she then reconsiders for the next time, and Nickel thanks her for taking care of his sister, while Jordo and Keith saw the scene both agree that Catarina is beautiful smiling. Later the same night, they enjoyed a fireworks show, even when Jordo admits that he intended to see it alone with Catarina. He'll do it a next time then. Then we see how Raphael is being overworked and exploited by his boss Rufus in the magic department, but he apologizes since it's a job. His boss asked where Lady Lana is, but he didn't know as they could see the file of paperwork of Lana's confirmation and how everyone is exploited in the office on the first plane. As they see the work environment being horrendous, also Raphael reflects on how he and his boss were welcomed by Lady Lana after the incident of dark magic, because in the case of Raphael, he was required to work at the magic department, but because no one wanted a dark magic user in their department, Lana took him. Lady Lana is a noble with an unknown past, but as he remembers her, a coworker collapses and almost falls asleep. While he thanks Lady Lana, he wishes that he could have a bed to sleep in. Following the scene, we see that Catarina and her friends are on a visit to the Magic's department, and they're welcomed by Raphael and Rufus, that goes by Sora now. Meanwhile, everyone watches Sora as if he gets any closer to her, he'll pay. Then Lady Lana arrives and welcomes them as she reminds them who she was and how she was a master of disguises. Raphael asked Lana where she's been, only to her dodging the question because she found some rare magic items. Later we see that the magic item that she found is a wish-granting dollhouse where people dream of different lives than the ones they're currently living. But as Lana was going to explain something, she was interrupted by her workers as they need her signatures and her permission, so she asks her visitors to wait for her and stepped out. Also, Raphael and Sora steps out because they'll make tea for them. Baccarina, being Baccarina, opens the dollhouse, provoking everyone in the room to be transported to the magic realm. Meanwhile, they're in the alternate dimension. Lana, Sora, and Raphael came back only to see the worlds where everyone's living now. Alan is now a bird that flies for the world, sings beautiful melodies, and kisses Catarina non-stop as Annie reflects that Alan's wishes are too pure and cute and how a book can't be judged by his cover. While Nickel is a black cat that charms Catarina with his devilish smile, visiting her every time and cuddling with her. For another part, Lana sees that every dream is coming reality in a different room of the dollhouse. Then we go to Sophia's dream as she wishes to be a fairy and takes an eternal vow of friendship with Catarina as they play in flower fields and sleep together. Next, we have Jorda that wants to live a life of freedom unbounded by social status, traveling around the world with the person he loves as they're about to kiss, and he interrupts as she wants to travel with Catarina too. Then we see Catarina's dream as she wants to live without any formal etiquette and just play, eat, and read while in bed. Then they see Keith, Mary, and Maria's dream, but they're enjoying themselves a bit too much. Following that, Lana says that is possible that they'll stay in those realms since they're too perfect for them. Afterwards, Sora recalls how 9 people disappeared the night they found the dollhouse, but there are only 8 rooms. And then Lana tells them that the only way to rescue them is to put a doll to sleep, and Raphael and Annie volunteer. Following this, they enter the house and start to search for everyone inside it, but first Annie opens a room and sees a bodybuilder, Maria, that would love to be cooking all day for Catarina. She then closed the door and proceeded to save it for later. Annie opens another door as well and sees Mary's dream. Mary dreams that she would be born as a male with a major status than Jordo, so she could snatch Catarina from his hand and humiliate him as he can't do anything against it. Annie, wiser than anybody, closes the door and saves it for later too. She then opens Keith's door and we see a gender-bent world since Keith doesn't understand the girl's wishes. Even Annie is male and they have visual contact. We jump to our protagonist as Catarina is reading and enjoying her time until she notices Annie's missing, so she perceives for the first time something is wrong as she notices that everyone got inside the dollhouse. Nextly to going out of her room, she sees Annie running from the other room and closing the door as she didn't expect to encounter her male version. After a warm hug, they decide to search for Raphael upstairs that was trying to sleep the doll, only to realize that Raphael also was immersed in his dream of a healthy work environment where everyone goes from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and there's no overwork and exploitation. So Catarina convinces him to go back to the real world as he also perceives that if he doesn't come back, his coworkers are gonna die in the toxic environment. Then Raphael stops being hypnotized and the doll appears and they began to fight with wind magic until Catarina interferes and put the doll down to sleep, making everyone exit their dream worlds. After that, Lana says her farewells to the dollhouse and also to the group since Raphael, tired of the situation, decides to start creating a healthy world environment in the real world by making Lana take responsibility for her work once and for all. The visit ends with Catarina asking everyone what their dreams were, but with anyone talking about it with a happy face. Elsewhere, Nickel and his father are talking with another noble about the possibility of marrying Nickel with his daughter, but his father declines. Out of the reunion, Nickel and Raphael meet and Nickel tells Raphael about his marriage problem since nobles normally are betrothed before entering high society, so after he explains how his father never rushes him and how he's more laid back than him, Raphael just advises him to not to lie to himself. At night, Nickel reflects on how difficult it's gonna be not to lie to himself as he is deeply in love with Catarina, but he has to forget her because she already has a fiancé and nonetheless his childhood friend, Jordo. So he has to start walking a new path. Later, Nickel asks his father for an arranged marriage meeting and to take care of Sophia. Then we jump to Frey and Ginger, who are working accommodating books at a library, and Catarina arrives to lend a hand to them. After that, Catarina is struggling to do homework, but Ginger helps her as she's grumping and being too noisy. Also, Ginger for some reason is acting nasty to Catarina, even thinking that she's a normie with no powers and everyone loves her, questioning why everyone likes her. Elsewhere, Nickel and his fathers receive a lot of invitations for arranged marriages, so Nickel starts by meeting a girl with glasses, but she's too nervous around him and shy that when he touches her head believing she had a fever, she faints. The next pretendant just talks and talks until Nickel's boredom wins over him since she talks about nobility unlike Catarina, so the girl after the meeting decides not to contact Nickel until he had an interest in her. That's how every meeting occurred, and he continues to reject the girls even when he had a genuine interest in meeting them. At night, Sophie gives him 3 books about stolen love, and Nickel is just shocked about it, but accepts them anyway. Time passes and the meetings occur, but Nickel is not interested enough in them until he meets with Frey. Frey beforehand states to Niccolo that she has no interest in getting married. In fact, she just attended this meeting because her parents make her do it so he can relax. Nextly, they go for a walk while Nickel expresses his problems even when he logically thinks that he only met Frey that afternoon. As they walk, he expresses how he's tormented inside by the fact that he's in love with the fiancé of his childhood friend, and Frey then motivates him to get her hand because Sophie would be happy about it, and Catarina isn't the type of woman that likes to be silent in a cold throne room, as she said that Nickel considers talking to his sister about her behavior in school. After a few beautiful flower garden landscapes, Nickel asks Frey why she doesn't want to get married, and Frey answers that she doesn't want to be only Noble's wife, that she wants to work at the magic department with Catarina and be an independent woman. Then she says to Nickel to stay true to himself as he'll regret it someday if he ends up marrying someone he doesn't love. Then Faye says her farewell to Nickel, wishing him the best luck in his quest. Later, Nickel requested his father to reject the other solicitations as he doesn't want to get married anymore. Elsewhere at school, Ginger hears how some girls talk bad behind her back, thinking that she has to work harder than others only to be considered a nasty person. She turns sad until Catarina says that she's adorable and altruistic, since she explains to Catarina how to do her homework. Even when the other girls tries to declare that she behaved bad around Catarina, Catarina denies it as she just sees a hardworking person making Ginger's heart move, and with Frey helping come out of her shell, she can finally start appreciating why Catarina is loved by everyone and wishes to work with her at the magic department along with Free. At night, Sophia encounters Nickel and pouting she reclaims why he didn't tell her that he wanted to get married and that her father would never pressure him to get married fast because of his past. Then she tells him that apparently loving the fiancé of your childhood friend is a family tradition since he also loved the fiancé of his childhood friend and stole her from him. Her dad was profusely opposed as he was a nobody and he put one condition. If he worked hard to become a prime minister, he would give her a hand in marriage. So his dad worked his fingers to the bone to achieve it and finally marry their mother. With this fierce motivation, Nickel decides to still pursue Catarina's love as he wants to stay by her side and love her with every inch of his heart by sharing one of the greatest passions in her life, reading books. It's a new morning and Keith walks into his sister's room only to see a bunch of gifts from Jordo. After the kiss, he now is more intense than before. Catarina is a little uncomfortable with this, but she accepts them anyways. While both siblings are walking to the school, Jordo suddenly appears and invades her personal space until Keith pushes her to him as he reclaims Jordo that Catarina is uncomfortable with these advances, which Jordo declines as he perceives it more like she's aware of his feelings, unlike the feelings of other one. At that moment, Alan and Mary arrive and Mary exclaims that Jordo shouldn't be here as he has tons of paperwork back in the student council. Jordo also states that after the kiss, there was a sudden massive work that was never done before and it's like someone is giving him extra work. Nevertheless, Mary claims that his paranoia is over him since he maybe is sleep deprived. After that intense scene, Keith and Catarina are reunited while Catarina eats her problems away. Keith starts to question if she wants to marry Jordo, which she declines as she doesn't want to, but she has no other option since it's royalty and also the privileges in the throne, also questioning if she deserves a position in the magic department as she has one of the weakest magic and pretty bad grades in school, and she's just merely getting in by her influences. After that, Keith pities her and starts to talk to himself only to leave the room. Later that afternoon, Catarina works on her fields and tries to visit Keith, but first, she is scolded by her mom and then she tries again to visit Keith only to see an empty room. Tomorrow morning arrives as Annie wakes up Catarina and sends her to her mother's chambers because of Keith's disappearance. Thereafter, her mother explains to her that Keith didn't arrive yesterday and gives her a letter from him that stated that Keith couldn't achieve the standards of being the Duke's successor, so he ran away. As Catarina read it, her mother blames her, stating that it's her fault because Keith always took care of her like a child since they were children. With that statement in mind, Catarina's 5-neuron council arises to plan a strategic plan and decides to search for him and bring him back to the mansion. Following the encounter, Catarina packs her things and then Jordo enters the room offering his help to Catarina and asks her what's her plan, and Catarina can't answer, so he proposed one. In the rear of lacking a plan, Catarina accepts. We jump to the scene to see Lana as they talk with her about Keith's issue. She proposes to use a magic tool she created. A bear that can smell and track anybody, so they need something that Keith treasures. In another place, Catarina and Annie search for an object that Keith treasures a lot, finding a box full of all Catarina's gifts to him, even old ones like a coupon she gave him because she landed her butt on him while climbing a tree. Later on, Alexander the bear sniffs the gift and only points in the direction where Keith may be, so they start their quest with Sora, Maria, and Lana now that they have to find Keith as soon as possible. While searching for Keith, Lana and Catarina decide to have lunch together, and Lana praises Catarina's cheerful behavior as she claims everybody enjoys having her as they consider her their everything like magic to her. Then we have a little view of Lana's past as she was bored of life until she met magic and became so obsessed with it that it molded who she is now. After not searching for Keith at this town, they decide to move until finding him, prolonging the search. The search is still going. As they search, they have to rest in an inn. At night, Catarina and Maria are close together, and the bear stills pick on Catarina being rude and making suggestive gestures, so Catarina is irritated by his attitude. Before going to bed, Maria tells Catarina even if it's a bad moment because Keith is missing, she's happy to be with her and wants to be by her side forever if she permits it, and Catarina tells her that yes, she would be pleased. On the other hand, Lana is using a wind dispositive similar to a cell phone to communicate with Raphael, who's still being exploited at work by her. They talk about a critical situation with not much detail, but is creepy enough that Lana doesn't believe Keith ran away, but instead was kidnapped by the people in this incident because even Duke Clays hasn't made any progress in this search. After the night, Catarina is interested in a strange mirror and Jordo buys it for her, but when he's about to make a move is interrupted by Sora, as they receive a legal and formal petition for Catarina's protection from a stranger citizen. Time passes as they still search for Keith, with no successful results, and decide to rest again by taking lunch. During lunch, Catarina is writing a letter to her friends as she's about to write that Jordo is gifting things to her, but he stops her as it would mean the imminent arrival of all her friends for her. Following lunch, Catarina, Maria, and the bear are still looking for Keith when she sees some sticky plant. Maria asks for its name, but because Catarina didn't know the name, the bear mocks her one more time, making Catarina plan the ultimate revenge against him. At night, Catarina waited patiently for everyone to leave the room and then stuck a lot of sticky plants to the bear. And when Maria asks what happened, she plays the innocent, lying to Maria. Later, Catarina thinks about how much she misses Keith. Elsewhere, we finally got to see Keith, but he's chained and bruised trying to break the chains in that dungeon when suddenly a creepy girl appears and praises him since unlike a lot of people, he is still focused and hasn't gone crazy with being imprisoned there for days and all the constant beatings, so she considers him a proper heir to Duke Clays. After thinking a little about it, she concludes that he's enduring it since when he was a child he was used to beatings like this, so she has decided to make him a test subject of dark magic that will break his mind until he goes crazy, since he has such a strong will, because a man named Thomas needs him to pass from a noble to a social scum. She then starts to laugh as she casts the spell on him while giving him the courage to fight against it, because the stronger he fought, the better the result would be. As Keith is being consumed by the dark magic, he gives himself courage as he needs to go back to Catarina. Somewhere else, Catarina wakes up after she believes that she heard someone scream, so she decides to talk alone in the garden. In the garden, she encounters Jordo that sees that in her hair there are sticky plants, so he removes them for her as she thinks that the nasty bear did it while she was sleeping. Jordo then asks Catarina why she's up so early, and Catarina tells him that's because she had a nightmare and also she's worried about Keith. With those words, Jordo admits that at first he was planning to use this travel as a way to grow closer to Catarina, but she's too worried, so he'll contain himself after saying that he hugs Catarina, telling her that he's happy enough now that she has noticed him. Then Sora once again intervenes as it's his duty. We jump to see adult Catarina seeing Keith cry and wants to comfort him, but she can't grab him until an invisible force drags her and forces her to wake up. Catarina wakes up with a fierce face as she promises to find her brother. Afterward, the group is in stealth mode at the mansion Alexander pointed out yesterday. As they arrive there, Lana asks Maria how she sees the place, and she answers that the same fog of yesterday is there engulfing the mansion. After analyzing the situation, Lana prefers to call some reinforcements as the whole mansion is watched by tons of guards, but Catarina is worried about Keith's well-being as the mansion is covered in dark magic, so she volunteers to go alone and Jordo wants to join her. Seeing this situation, Lana agrees for the whole group to go then, but asks Sora to do his shenanigans as they have to enter the mansion. After Sora explodes a part of the mansion, they infiltrate inside the mansion as they advance. Some guards found and tried to stop them, but Sora, Jordo, and Lana neutralized them, while Maria healed them since they inflicted mortal wounds, especially Jordo. After that, they found a room surrounded by black fog and enter it to only find a chubby guy on a carpet. As they wake up to see he's off, they ask if he knew where Keith is, only to see the guy cursing Keith and how his tutor and his servants were at fault for making him lose his status. We had a flashback of Thomas, the chubby guy, as he saw Keith being happy with Catarina and being adopted by the Duke Clays, so he swore revenge, and the creepy gorilla before helped through it. Then he dragged himself to a bookshelf while still cursing Keith as he was the son of a mistress of his father and how unfair his life was until he and everyone just watched the whole thing. A secret door was behind that bookshelf, and they opened the room to see Keith inside a magic circle filled with pure and obnoxious dark magic. So much so that even Sora and Maria couldn't be near it. Catarina and Jordo try to wake up Keith while the other part of the group searches for the dark mage as she can stop this. Inside Keith's mind, we can see how the darkness almost consumed him and how he's letting it win. Catarina cries and desperately tries to wake him up, but every effort is futile until she starts crying and wishes she can rip those dark things off like serpents, so a mysterious bright starts to shine from the mirror Jordo bought before and the darkness becomes snakes, and then Catarina starts to rip them off while inside Keith's mind he can see upon the darkness a bright star, and the hopes begin to rise as he starts first by dragging himself out the darkness while giving us a speech of how he will not give up until he can share his lifetime with the person he cherishes the most, and finally the dark world starts falling over to reveal Catarina as his savior. After that, Catarina successfully ripped off all the darkness and smacked it with all her might. Then Keith finally wakes up and kisses Catarina, saying that's a beautiful dream. Catarina is surprised, but not more surprised than when all the darkness that was with Keith becomes a puppy and jumps towards her, kissing her face. While that happened, the Dark Mage appeared and she congratulated Catarina for achieving dark magic familiar, but also questioned how did she pull that without dark magic, but she had no time, so she left in a blink. Later at the carriages, Giordo is thankful that Catarina and everybody are alright, but kisses Catarina as a way to disinfect her and annoys Keith a little even if he's too weak. Days pass and Catarina is playing with her familiar Pochi, which can live in her shadow. Annie then arrives and tells her that Keith finally has woken up. Rushing with content, Catarina hugs Keith as she's relieved but also separates from him as she remembers the kiss incident but tells him not to worry as they can pretend it didn't happen. But Keith declines as he states that his first kiss was with a person he loved, so he finally confesses his love repeatedly, and Catarina is in shock since he's her brother. The harem goes into the room and Giordo interrupts the love confession as he claims that Catarina is his, but Mary intervenes in this nonsense as she claims that Catarina is from no one and everybody agrees, even Sophia then wants to give books to Catarina for her recovery. But the recovering one is Keith, even though she still has the good intentions. Sometime after the incident, Susanna gives Geoffrey the report of the Keith kidnapping, revealing that Thomas Coleman was a mere puppet and him with also the mansion owner was controlled by a dark magic user named Sarah. Also that Deke's family is responsible for this as they got orphans and purchased children to do tests with dark magic upon them, and one of those children was Sarah. After that, Susan explains that Catarina was able to rip off the dark magic with the help of her ugly mirror, and by taming a dark familiar, she now has a good excuse to go into the magic department, and how she can't wait until she graduates. Somewhere in the academy, Giordo is giving his graduate speech as valedictorian, and the 5-neuron council with Catarina is thankful about being able to graduate at all. As the speech and the tea party began and everyone received flowers, including Catarina, who also received a bouquet of sweets from Ginger. Catarina then asks Ginger if she's going to tonight's party at the castle, but because she doesn't have proper clothes, she considers that no. Then Catarina offers to lend her some clothes and Free encourages her, as it's not every day that someone won't admire Len's clothes. We jump to scenes as we see how her parents are proud of her, even her mother who is given in seeing her one day graduate. Going to the party in the carriage, Ginger expresses how she'll look magnificent and won't be shy around jealous people. At the party, Catarina is welcomed by Giordo's older siblings, but Giordo intervenes as he wants to be alone with his fiancée and invites her to dance. While dancing, he states that he wants Catarina to be in his mind all the time, and then Keith becomes once again a third wheel and interrupts, making Giordo go to attend his visitors. Keith, taking advantage of this bug, invites Catarina to dance and warns her about Giordo may taking advantage of her. While being alone, the two of them so ask her to play safe. On the other hand, after Keith's dance, Nickel invites Beccarina, while smiling, making faint most of the people around them with his devilish smile. While dancing, Catarina asks him about his proposal meeting and how she considers it difficult, but he denies it as he only tells him that he needs to fix his mind about it and he'll try something after. Later, Catarina is exhausted of Nickel's charm, so she decides to eat like a pig, while Alan was looking until he laughed about it, since she eats like there was no one seeing her, to which Catarina answers it was because it's delicious and gives him food with his fork, making Mary and Sophia jealous over it. The night passes and Catarina stays at Giordo's castle at a pajama party with her friends, but first wants to show Keith her new pajama, but Keith is passionate about his love, so he dragged Catarina to the bed, but didn't do something, because this was the warning he gave Catarina earlier, and unlike Giordo, he won't advance until her consent and kicks her out of the room. Then Catarina passes the time with her friends and she still asks what kind of people do they like. They, as per usual, answer the physical description of Catarina, but she's still oblivious. Later, Catarina had a dream where she got to see Akin happy as usual. She goes near her only to see that Akin was playing Fortune Lover 2 and grow enough panic to wake her up. But her friends calm her as it only was a dream. Against all, Catarina and Maria join the magic department, finally being welcomed by Sora and Raphael, who send them to their seniors to do the proper welcoming. Catarina stresses as she sees they're the people she sees in her dream, initiating another conquest, avoiding her ultimate doom.